Here we have Rating Men I've Dated, Season 1, Episode 4, Sam the Addict. Hello, hello, I'm eating cheese today. It's Gouda. It's really good. Welcome to another episode of Rating Men I've Dated. I'm your host, Charles Burns. Let me finish eating my cheese. This episode, we have something that hits kind of close to home, which is addiction. We're going to be talking about addiction. Those of you who don't know, I'm a child of the 90s. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. And in the 90s in America, we were going through something called the opioid epidemic. And it's when there was a new kind of medicine that came out called opioids. Doctors thought they were not addictive because they were told that by these evil pharmaceutical companies who knew that they were extremely addictive. And then they prescribed opioids to a bunch of people. Millions of people all across America got prescribed a ton of opioids, and they all became addicted to opioids and other substances because that's how addiction works. And millions of people in America became addicted to substances. My father was one of those people. So I grew up in a house that was struggling hardcore with addiction. It really impacted our lives a lot. There was a lot of crazy things that happened in my house, and it was not super safe because my father was an addict. Later on in life, when I started dating, I did date a few people who had substance abuse issues. And this next person we're going to rate today, this is Sam. They told me right away that they had substance abuse problems, and I was attracted to that because they were really working on it. When I was in college, I took a class called History of the English Language. It was a college class where we were learning the history of the English language. And the teacher would sometimes make us break off into groups, and she would put me and this guy, Sam, together. And even though Sam was 5 years younger than me and just kind of like this kid, I could not help but flirt with him. He was so cute. But I was trying to get an A, but I would still flirt with him. And so after class, I one time invited him over to a friend's house. And there I was like, hey, you want a beer? And Sam said, no, I can't drink. I'm an alcoholic. And I found that very attractive because I only know people who had known that they had a substance abuse problem but then kept doing it. And then here was Sam knowing he had a substance abuse problem and then abstaining. And I found that really attractive in some way. And so Sam and I started to date. Oh, let's rate the seriousness of our relationship. We lived together for a while. And I was with Sam for almost 2 years, but I gotta say, I never thought I was gonna be with Sam for the rest of my life. I was never like, oh, this person I can see a long-term committed future with. I always just kind of thought it was fun and funny. So even though I lived with him and even though we built a little home together, I never took it that seriously. So I would say it was serious, but temporary. That's the seriousness of our relationship. Let's get into rating Sam. We're going to rate Sam over the next 7 things. We're going to rate him on lover points, romance points, handsomeness points, helpfulness points, stability points, faithfulness points, and finally, how it ended. He was a street musician. He played guitar so good. He could play guitar so good. He was amazing. He played for money on the street. I love listening to him play. As far as lover points go, Sam was a better lover. He had more experience being a lover to somebody who wasn't my shape, who had different parts than me. In bed, solid 3.4. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. I was with you 2 years. And Sam was very romantic to me. I will say that Sam was always trying to be romantic. Sam could have gotten 9 or 10 romance points here, but I went through and read some of his love letters, and a lot of them were about himself. He would write me a love letter, but it would all be about how he was feeling. And I just think a really good love letter is when you say to your lover, you are beautiful, you are charming, you are exquisite. He wrote me several songs on the guitar, and he could play guitar super well. Here are the things about you I like. And Sam would try to do that, but most of his love letters were about himself. And he always tried. He was always constantly trying to make me dinner, to take me to a place, to give me a love note. He was always trying. So I will give him an 8. He tried harder than most people I had ever dated. A lot of people kind of forget about romance after a while. They get into a routine. But Sam always remembered, and he always was trying. As far as handsomeness goes, it's hard for me. Again, Sam would get a higher score here, but I remember that after he became an addict, his handsomeness really stopped because part of being handsome is taking care of yourself. And Sam used to do that really well, and then when he became an addict, he doesn't. So overall, the total handsomeness points he can get here is going to be an 8. Because he was goddamn fucking hot. He really was really good looking. When he was with me, he was so hot. He looked like a hot Long Island Jesus. But I also remember that beauty is something we have to try and do a little bit too, and he stopped trying. So 8 points on handsomeness. As far as helpfulness goes, Sam was one of my most helpful lovers. When he lived with me, I paid the majority of rent, and then he would do all of the dishes, he would take out all the trash, he would go get groceries, he would have dinner waiting for me when I got home. Sam was super helpful up until the point that he was very unhelpful. He was like my little wife, and I really enjoyed that part of our relationship. He took care of me and was very helpful up until the point he started lying and doing substances again. Up until that point, he was an incredibly helpful lover. So aggregate altogether, he still gets pretty high helpfulness points, even though he did become an addict at the later part of our relationship, and that really made things way harder. So I will say for helpfulness, he gets a 6.1. Stability points goes, Sam was always struggling. You know, he was a street musician. He was playing for money on the street. He made a good amount of money, but it was never really reliable how much he was going to make. As far as stability points go, Sam's going to get more points than he deserves here because he had a very stable family who was very kind to him and to me, and we're supporting him all the time. We had a joke, Sam and I, when we were together. I would say, like, you know, Sam, if you had been born in my family, you'd be dead by now. Ha 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 ha. It's not a funny joke. But it was true because Sam's family is what enabled him to stay alive so long because they didn't want him to be an addict. They were putting him in and out of rehabs. They were trying to help him as much as they could in this very kind way. They also helped me just because I was with Sam and they wanted Sam to be doing super well. So Sam himself wasn't stable, but Sam's family gets at least 4 points. So Sam gets 4 points of stability because of his great family. I will say that Sam gets a 4.0 for stability, mostly because of his family, his awesome family. As far as faithfulness goes, now when I rate someone on faithfulness, I'm not just talking about not cheating. I'm talking about at a level of honesty that is required to make someone feel secure. And if your lover isn't explaining to you their deepest desires or what they're doing, if they're not letting you be part of their life, I don't consider that being faithful. And Sam started lying to me near the end of our relationship for several months. And he was drinking and he was doing drugs and he was lying to me about it. And so that's not what I consider being faithful. So I will say that Sam just gets 5 faithfulness points. Because the reason he was lying was because he was sick. He wasn't lying because he wanted to. He was lying because of his sickness, but he still didn't take his sickness seriously. So I'm being a little too generous here. He probably deserves a little bit less than 5 points, but we're going to say 5 because I'm sick too, and sick people deserve a break. As far as ending goes, it's hard for me here because Sam was sick, and the reason I had to end it with Sam, I broke up with him here, is because he was sick and I couldn't deal with his sickness. Sam wanted me to not leave. He wanted me to understand he was sick and that it was all his sickness. And I do understand that, but I couldn't be in it anymore. My father is an addict, Sam is an addict, and sometimes addicts do things that hurt us so much that it's better to just have more space. And it doesn't mean I don't love Sam or I don't love my dad. It just means that the kind of relationship I can have with them has to be one where there's more space in between it. And Sam and I used to be very close. We used to live together. We used to be lovers. And because of the things that Sam has done, I can no longer be close to him. I understand up until the point that you marry someone, you don't have to deal with their sickness, right? That's why in the marriage vows I say in sickness and in health. But I am a sick person myself. I have an autoimmune disease. I'm slowly losing my ability to move. So it's hard for me because if I say I broke up with Sam because he was sick, it also, like, someone else can break up with me because I'm sick. And that's just a difficult place to be because we don't want our sickness to be the reason, you know. But sickness is great and big. And while I can accept that Sam was sick and while I still love Sam, what he happened while he was sick hurt me so much that I can no longer be close to him. And that's similar to my father. Like, my father is an addict and my father's done such strange things that have hurt me so much that I can't really have a close relationship with my father. I can love him and I can understand that he's sick and struggling, but I need to keep him at a distance. And the same thing happened with Sam. where Sam just hurt me so greatly that even though I loved him, and even though I do understand that it wasn't Sam trying to be a dick, it was Sam struggling with addiction and his sickness, I can't be close to him in the way that I used to anymore. And that always troubles me because I've had other people do that with me too. I'm not an addict, I have an autoimmune disease, but it's hard to deal with sick people. Sickness changes people, as is pain. So for the ending, I will say 3.3, mostly because I couldn't be the big enough person that I wanted to be. And I'm sorry, Sam. I'm sorry I couldn't help you more. I'm going to now tally up all of Sam's scores. We're going to tally them all up. Lover, romance, handsome, helpful, stable, faithful, ending. What does Sam get? And Sam gets a total of 37.8. Good job, Sam. Is that of a total of 70? You could get more than 70 points if I gave you more than 10 out of each thing, but typically 70. This is done pretty well. Good job, Sam. Thanks for letting me rate you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for your hard work and dedication in our 2-year relationship. Join me next week when I rate another guy. I think next week I'm going to rate the long-distance marathon runner I dated for a summer. He ran a marathon in under 3 hours right before I met him. So that might be who I rate next week. Join me then. Like and subscribe for more. See you soon. Thanks for watching. Join me next time when I rate another man on these same 7 things. Can't wait to see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.